just a rap disagreement. This is a story about betrayal, ego, money, and a wound that never really healed because when Kodak Black refused that deal, he didn't just say no. He exposed something deeper that YoungBoy was never supposed to let the world see. It starts loud, but if you listen carefully, there's something quieter underneath it, something uncomfortable. Because on the surface it looks simple. Kodak hears the music, calls it trash, shrugs it off like it's nothing. But the way he said it, the timing, the repetition, that wasn't casual. That was deliberate. That was someone poking at a nerve they knew was still sensitive. And the moment those words hit the internet, everything changed. The temperature shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't about music anymore. It was about history. Because these two didn't start as enemies. That's what makes this feel so heavy. Back in 2017, they weren't throwing shots. They were making hits. Real chemistry, real connection, the kind of bond that fans believed in. It felt like something big was forming, two raw Southern voices building something together. But even then, there were cracks. Small at first, easy to ignore, until they weren't. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Kodak didn't just critique the album. He suggested something else, something personal. I feel like he's dropping that just to get my attention. That line doesn't sound like industry talk. That sounds like someone who feels targeted, watched, provoked, and once that idea enters the conversation, everything else starts to look different. Every release, every move, every silence. Then came the whispers. Not one woman, two. That's what Kodak hinted at. Not directly, not cleanly, just enough to plant the idea. Two of his past relationships somehow circling back into YoungBoy's orbit. Now ask yourself, coincidence or pattern? Because in this world, patterns aren't accidents, they're messages. And once you see a pattern, you can't unsee it. The internet caught it instantly. Fans started connecting dots, digging through timelines, replaying moments that once felt random. Suddenly, nothing looked random anymore. Everything looked intentional. And when you mix that kind of personal tension with public criticism, that's not a disagreement, that's ignition. But here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. This isn't just about relationships or music. It's about something much bigger, something that goes all the way back to the beginning. Kodak once claimed YoungBoy was supposed to be under him, signed to his label. Think about that for a second. A completely different timeline, a version of reality where YoungBoy builds his empire under Kodak's umbrella, where the power dynamic is flipped. Now look at what actually happened. YoungBoy didn't sign, he built his own. And not just anything, a machine, a movement. Never Broke Again turned into something massive, something independent, something uncontrollable. And somewhere in the background, Kodak was watching it happen. Watching the one that got away turn into something bigger than anyone expected. You can pretend that doesn't matter, but it does. Because missed opportunities don't disappear. They sit there, quiet, growing, turning into something heavier over time. And when you finally speak on them, it never comes out clean. It comes out like this, disguised as criticism, wrapped in insults, fueled by something that's been building for years. Then the sides started forming. Lil Durk's circle stepping in, YoungBoy's people pushing back, comments turning into statements, statements turning into tension. And just like that, the machine started moving again. Not slowly, instantly. Because this wasn't new. This was something that had been waiting for a reason to come back. And Kodak didn't stop. He kept repeating it. Different videos, same message. It's trash. Over and over again. That kind of repetition isn't about opinion. It's about making sure nobody misses the point. It's about control. About forcing a narrative into the conversation whether people agree or not. But here's where it gets even stranger. Kodak said he wasn't worried. Said he had real music coming. Said he didn't care what anyone else was doing. But if that's true, why keep talking? Why keep circling back? Why keep bringing his name into the spotlight? Because people who are truly unbothered don't move like this. And YoungBoy? Silence, no direct response. No immediate reaction, just movement. And sometimes, movement says more than words ever could. Because while Kodak was talking, YoungBoy was doing something else entirely. Something quiet, something calculated, something that didn't look like a response at first, but felt like one. And if you've been paying attention, you already know what's coming next. Because this wasn't the explosion, this was just the pressure building. And the real trigger? It hadn't even been pulled yet. And then it happened. Not with a diss track, not with a direct response, but with something far colder, far more calculated, a move that didn't need words because it screamed louder than anything Kodak had said. Paris, out of all the places in the world. Paris. The timing wasn't random, the location wasn't random, and the person standing next to YoungBoy definitely wasn't random. Melo Racks, not just any artist, not just any collaborator, Kodak Black's former fiancée, not a rumor, not a maybe, a confirmed past engagement. That kind of history doesn't fade quietly. It lingers, it sticks, and suddenly she's not just around YoungBoy, she's with him, moving through the most romantic city in the world like it's a statement. Now ask yourself, what does that look like from Kodak's side? Because this isn't the first time. That's the detail that makes everything heavier. Once can be coincidence. Twice, that's a pattern. And patterns feel personal. Patterns feel intentional. Patterns feel like someone is sending a message without ever opening their mouth. YoungBoy didn't go live. He didn't rant. He didn't defend himself. He dropped a collaboration, a full visual, high production, cameras rolling through Paris streets, luxury backdrops, controlled shots, deliberate framing. That's not spontaneous, that's strategy, that's planning. That's someone understanding exactly how this will be received before it even touches the internet. And when Melo Racks went public, calling him the realest person I've ever met, everything shifted again. Because that's not just praise, that's comparison. That's coming from someone who knew Kodak closely enough to almost marry him, someone who saw both sides of him. And now she's placing YoungBoy above that standard? That's not noise, that's pressure. Kodak saw it, of course he did. And the reaction came fast, not always directly, but loud enough for everyone to understand. Clones, that's what he called them, both of them. And that word carries weight. It's not just an insult, it's a claim. It's him saying everything YoungBoy became started with him. That the blueprint, the style, the energy, it all traces back to Kodak. But here's the contradiction that nobody can ignore. If YoungBoy is just a clone, why does he feel so impossible to ignore? Because while Kodak was still negotiating, still fighting for leverage, still trying to reach the numbers he believed he deserved, YoungBoy had already moved, already secured the deal, already built the system that gave him control. 60 million, not rumored, not speculated, real. And that number doesn't just represent money, it represents power, freedom, ownership, and Kodak said it himself without realizing how revealing it sounded. I can't let him be out his deal and getting to that real bag while I'm still in mine. That's not just frustration, that's comparison. That's watching someone you once stood next to move ahead in a way you can't ignore anymore. Then came the diss track, not from YoungBoy, from Melo Racks, Poke the Bear. Even the title felt like a warning, not subtle, not hidden, direct. She wasn't pretending this was accidental. She leaned into it. And the lyrics? Personal, detailed crossing lines that only someone with inside knowledge could cross. And when she brought up protective custody, that wasn't just a jab. That was an attack on identity, on credibility, on everything Kodak's image is built on. At that point, silence wasn't an option anymore. Kodak responded, but by then, the damage was already spreading faster than anything he could contain. Screenshots surfaced, old messages, his own camp getting exposed in ways nobody expected. The narrative started slipping, control started shifting, and suddenly, this wasn't just about two rappers anymore. It was bigger, messier, harder to contain. Because now the internet had everything it needed: history, emotion, betrayal, receipts. And here's the part that makes it impossible to ignore. This all happened while YoungBoy was stepping into his freedom, fresh out of restrictions, dropping a 30-track album, launching a tour, moving like someone who had been waiting years for this exact moment. Everything lined up too perfectly. The music, the timing, the controversy, all of it feeding into each other. Kodak called it attention-seeking. But what if it wasn't? What if this wasn't about attention at all, but about control, about sending a message without ever saying it directly, about proving that no matter what's said, no matter who talks, the moves will always speak louder? Because at the center of all of this, buried under the insults, the reactions, the speculation, there's one question that refuses to go away. Did Kodak lose an artist, or did he lose something much bigger than that? And more importantly, is this really over? Or are we just watching the beginning of something that's been building for years, finally breaking open in public?